Afternoon, everybody. Sorry I'm a little bit late. I'll try not to let it happen again, but again, my apologies. Your time is valuable as well, I know. A few announcements off the top regarding the Secretary's schedule before I turn to your questions. This morning, Secretary Carter received an update on the counter-ISIL fight from some of his combatant commanders and other military leaders. He received updates on the situation both in Syria and in Iraq. They discussed the tragedy in Paris and the decision by the French government to expand its counter-ISIL efforts. As he mentioned last night at the Wall Street Journal CEO Council, the Secretary hopes this tragedy will galvanize others to do even more as well. He has asked his commanders in the field to consider where the coalition effort can be expanded further with the help of our partners. Also this morning, the Secretary and Chairman Dunford met with Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff General Raheel Sharif to discuss mutual security interests, including security cooperation between our countries, Pakistani counterterrorism operations in the federally administered tribal areas, and regional security dynamics. The Secretary expressed his appreciation for Pakistan's ongoing counter-terror efforts and condolences for the heavy losses incurred by Pakistani security forces and civilians in this fight. The Secretary underscored the importance of increased Pakistan-Afghanistan cooperation. The Deputy Secretary also toured the Pentagon 9/11 Memorial with General Raheel this morning, and the Chairman held a separate discussion with the General, and General Austin will meet with him later today in addition. And finally, the Secretary this afternoon is attending a meeting with current and former military leaders of the Department and with independent experts to discuss possible Defense Department reforms. This is one in a series of meetings being held to discuss areas of potential reform to the defense enterprise in the spirit of the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986. The series of meetings will examine potential overlaps or redundancies and areas in which performance could be streamlined or improved within the Department. These meetings will help set the Department's reform agenda and determine the path forward to ensure our continued strength. And the Secretary tomorrow will touch on one area of interest when he discusses his Force of the Future initiative at GW University, and you all should have received advisory on that speech tomorrow. And with that, be happy to turn to your questions. Lita?
Peter, can you, one quick question on Abood. I'm wondering if you can tell us whether or not he was on a hit list or if there were any efforts to strike him at some point by the military or the coalition. But I have a sort of a Russia question. Do you want to, I can throw that out now, or do you want me to wait?
Why don't you throw that out now, and then we'll see if we can knock all these out of the way.
So seeing the airstrikes, Russia appeared to be striking areas in the same region as the U.S. in that oil infrastructure area. I'm wondering whether there's any further discussion or consideration of more cooperation with Russia, as it appears Moscow is indeed trying to step up its efforts for airstrikes, and also some cooperation with France.
Yeah. On your first question, I'm not going to get into intelligence from up here at the podium, but I can say, and we've repeated, that leadership figures within ISIL are always a legitimate target, but we're not going to get into the identities of anyone in particular who we may or may not have targeted. So that's the extent of what I can say on that first question. And on the second question, you're asking, is there an opportunity here for further cooperation with the Russians?
Is there an opportunity? Has there been any further discussion? And does Russia's latest effort to beef up its strikes in a region that was actually near where the U.S. and the coalition have been hitting, and their effort to reach out to France also for some more collaboration, does that trigger any additional thoughts toward cooperating more with Russia?
Well, right now we are not cooperating with Russia, as you know. In this instance, their most recent airstrikes, they did give us advance notice through the memorandum of understanding that is in place regarding our efforts to try and keep the airspace over Syria safe. And so they did use the protocols there to notify us in advance. But at this point, and those airstrikes, at least from our vantage point, did appear to strike in ISIL-held territory. And as we've said from the start, that if the Russians would like to focus their efforts on ISIL, which is the thrust of our efforts in terms of the coalition, we would welcome that. But again, that's a decision that's up to the Russians at this point, and there's been no additional talk of further cooperation or coordination with the Russians at this point. Again, we'll wait to see what the Russians do next, and we refer you to them in terms of their intentions going forward. But their policies of supporting the Assad regime continue, in our view, to be counterproductive. Backwards is the words that the Secretary has used. And so until they alter that policy, we don't see much of an area for further cooperation.
Well, there was, just as a quick follow-up, the Secretary did mention yesterday sort of the need to sort of broaden the fight against ISIL and, looking for other partners to kind of do more. Does Russia not represent, at this point, an opportunity for that?
Again, the Secretary has always left the door open to the Russians, as he first encouraged Minister Shoigu in their initial conversation some weeks ago, to play a constructive role here and to not only take part in the campaign against ISIL and to target ISIL specifically, but also to use their influence with the Assad regime in trying to forge a political transition. And so we welcome any sincere effort on the part of the Russians to play a more constructive role in Syria. And again, the opportunity is there for the Russians to accept that opportunity.
Peter, if I could
Jamie.
follow up a little bit. So, I mean, clearly the United States and Russia have many areas of disagreement. They also have areas in which they work together. Russian President Putin has directed his military to work with France to develop what he called a joint action plan to target ISIL in Syria. If France can work with Russia on a joint action plan, why can't the United States?
Well, let me, first of all, the French, I will leave it to the French to discuss the decisions that they're making, their relationship with the Russians. It's not for us to comment on. They are a key and critical member of the coalition. We've seen what they've been doing in recent days in the wake of the Paris attack. So, again, the French commitment is clear, and we feel confident that we will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with France in terms of this ongoing effort. And the Secretary has said all along that when it comes to Russia, we will maintain a strong and balanced approach. There are going to be areas where we disagree with the Russians, significant disagreements, in Ukraine, for example. But there have also been areas where we can work together. One is the Iran nuclear accord. Secretary Kerry has been working with Minister Lavrov on the political side of this equation, the diplomatic side, and we're supportive of that and encouraging of that.
You seem to be making my point, though. You cited an area where the U.S. and Russia can work together. So, and the U.S. and Russia have a common enemy in Syria in the form of ISIL. So why is it so difficult to find an area where there is a common goal and to work together?
Well, Jamie, we haven't ruled that out, except that up to this point, the Russian actions have been largely in support of the Assad regime, which we believe is counterproductive to the end result of trying to end the Syrian civil war. It has been like pouring gasoline on the fire, in the words of Secretary Carter. And in this instance, these most recent airstrikes have appeared to have targeted ISIL-controlled areas. That's a good thing. And again, if the Russians would like to focus their efforts on not only targeting ISIL, but also pushing forward the diplomatic solution that needs to be reached in Syria and using their considerable influence with the Assad regime, we're supportive of that. And we would hope the Russians would take advantage of that opportunity.
Just one more. Can you just address the perception, and again, I'm talking about perception, that Russia is taking a much more muscular approach to confronting ISIL, stepping up its airstrikes, working with France. The Russian president was seen today in a high-tech war room getting his latest briefings on Syria. While the United States position, we are giving the position, it seemed to be giving the impression that we're just going to do more of the same. The president made pretty clear yesterday he doesn't see a need to radically change the strategy. Can you address that perception that maybe President Putin again seems to be winning the PR war here in terms of who's doing the most to battle ISIL?
Jamie, at this podium and elsewhere, we've detailed our efforts in the fight against ISIL over the last year or so, more than 8,000 airstrikes. You have Secretary of Defense up on Capitol Hill not too long ago talking about the adjustments we're making to our strategy, the prospect for a small number of special operations forces to go in to bolster the fight. We're doing what we can to move this strategy forward, where we're supporting local motivated forces that are going to obviously need to be in place to not only dislodge ISIL, but to hold that territory. We are focused on this effort. We remain focused on this effort. And the notion that we are behind the curve here is a mistaken one. We are actively looking at a whole host of opportunities to further this fight against ISIL, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And again, the Secretary's talked about this. We welcome others getting into this game, but the United States has been in this game from the start and will continue to be. Yes, Kevin?
Two questions. So the Russians now say it was a bomb that took down the airliner. Does Pentagon of the U.S. confirm that it was a bomb and that ISIS was involved? Second part, I want to ask about Secretary Kerry today saying the U.S. would work more closely with Turkey to secure the border at Syria from smuggling. What exactly does that mean? How is the U.S. going to help in that effort, particularly any U.S. military effort? And is it just for smuggling goods, or is this also specifically aimed at keeping out foreign fighters and that flow that's so worrisome to Europe?
Yeah. First of all, we have not reached any final conclusions. Certainly here at the Department of Defense, I'm going to defer to my colleagues in other agencies that are more focused on the downing of this airliner specifically, but we have not reached any conclusions here beyond what we've said to you in the past with regard to the cause of this.
Increased communication with the Russians about the incident?
Not between the Department of Defense. I can't speak for other agencies. So we're in the same place there. We obviously took note of the Russian conclusions. And with regard to the other issues, I'm not sure exactly what Secretary Kerry said, but because I didn't see his comments directly. But we've been working on these border issues for some time. The issue of foreign fighters remains of critical importance to the United States, to the Department of Defense, and anything that can be done to tighten that border, to deal with the issue of foreign fighters, we think is a positive and something that not only bolsters the national security of the United States, but also the national security of our coalition partners and those in the region and in Europe as well. Let me just go. Jennifer?
Peter, you said that the Defense Department has carried out 8,000 airstrikes. The Russians say they've carried out 2,300 airstrikes in the last 2 days. That suggests an escalation in their efforts compared to ours. And secondly, it's still a little hard to understand why the U.S., 15 months after the air campaign began, only just cut the road between Raqqa and Mosul near Sinjar, and also began airstrikes against these fuel tankers, which by the Pentagon's own estimates are providing $1 million a month, I think it is, for ISIS. So can you kind of
Sure. You got a couple questions in there. Let me try and take them all. First of all, I'm not going to comment directly on the number of Russian sorties, that sort of thing. I can just tell you what we're doing, and our campaign continues to be effective. We are carefully selecting our targets. We've got other nations flying these missions. They have been effective in taking the fight to ISIL, in limiting their operations, what they can do out in the open. It is very different to be an ISIL leader today than it was just a few months ago. They know the risks to their well-being if they are out and about. That is a direct result of our coalition air campaign. With regard to specifically what's happened in Sinjar, this is something that required ground operations and ground forces, not necessarily just an air campaign. And in this case, there are motivated local ground forces, the Iraqi Peshmerga forces, that have moved to take this, to cut off this vital supply line, as you pointed out. And this is a significant step forward, and they should be commended for what they've done there. They've had the support of the coalition, they've had support of U.S. advisors on the ground, and they've made progress in that one particular area.
Were the Peshmerga not ready a year ago to do this?
Again, this is going to be a fight, Jennifer, in which there steps forward and steps backward. This was a step forward, and this represents progress since that area was lost, of course, to ISIL some months ago. So this is an example of where the fight has been taken to ISIL and where those local forces are making progress, making advances. We'd like to see it in more places, and there are going to be setbacks along the way as well. This is one particular instance in which these forces have succeeded in moving to an objective, and they've had the support of the coalition, and specifically U.S. advisors in conducting that.
Why did it take so long to go after the oil tankers?
Again, we look at the situation on the ground there and the targets very, very carefully. And there's been discussion about ways to try and go after the infrastructure in such a way that it's less of an opportunity for them to collect revenue. And there have been decisions recently that address the issue of these tankers and whether or not they were an appropriate target to go after. And there were concerns, and have been concerns, continue to be concerns about the potential for civilian casualties along the way. So every step was taken to try and reduce the prospect of that. And those strikes, 116 tankers were taken out, and as best we can tell, there were no civilian casualties. So we consider that to be a success. Let me move over here. Yes?
To follow up on Sinjar, some reports on the ground from local Yazidis who lived there, there are concerns that the Kurds and the Peshmerga have not allowed the Yazidis to return as they're retaking that territory. I know that the process is still in the clearing stage, but has the United States taken any role in helping to establish the local population's ability to get back into those retaken areas?
I'm not sure the exact situation in terms of how dangerous it is in that area right now. I'm sure that's a consideration for not only the Peshmerga forces, but for others in the region. So I can't talk specifically to their particular situation because I just don't have visibility on it. But you can imagine this is a place that's just had a firefight, a pretty intense battle over the last couple of days and weeks. And I'm sure that's got to be one of the considerations, but I'd refer you to specifically our folks in Iraq who might have a better understanding of the exact dynamics there.
Okay, a quick follow on the overall strategy. Has the United States and the coalition heard from any other partners willing to join in coalition airstrikes, and has the United States made any plans to increase efforts for airstrikes since the Paris attacks?
Well, we've obviously got partners already within the coalition conducting airstrikes. You've seen the French step up what they're doing with regard to airstrikes, and we think there are opportunities for others to do the same. I'll let other nations speak as to their own contributions and what they're willing to do moving forward, but as the Secretary pointed out last night in his comments at the Wall Street Journal CEO Council, he believes that there are opportunities for others to do more in this effort. The United States has done a significant amount of those airstrikes, and certainly it would make the campaign more effective if others were to play a larger role. But again, we welcome the contributions of the countries so far. We welcome additional contributions, and there are other ways where countries, in the wake of what's happened in Paris, could play a constructive role going forward. It's not just in the form of airstrikes, and we welcome any of those contributions. Yeah, Jamie?
Thanks, Peter. Just to follow up on something you addressed a little bit ago on the rate of Russian airstrikes against ISIS versus hitting others. You know, last month we heard from the State Department saying that there was as much as 90% of the airstrikes that Russia was doing was not hitting ISIS. I'm curious, in the wake of today's announcement of them hitting inside Raqqa, are you seeing that number come down a little bit? Are they going after ISIS more the last few weeks?
Yeah. I can't characterize the last few weeks. I can just point to what's happened most recently as an indication that my understanding is the majority of these airstrikes, the most recent airstrikes, were targeted in ISIL-controlled areas, but writ large, it's pretty clear that up to this point, most of the focus has been on areas that have not been controlled by ISIL and have been controlled either by the regime or the opposition. And but it does seem that at least in recent days, there's been more of a focus on ISIL, and we welcome that. But in terms of the big picture, again, I think I'll leave you to the Russians to characterize what it is their intentions are and whether or not this is a change that's going to continue.
And then if I could just follow up on if you could just bring us up to speed on the efforts of the Syrian Arab Coalition. We had reports this week that a second delivery of ammunition was made to them. I wonder if you could just bring us up to speed on how that group is doing in its fight against ISIS. Are you seeing more tangible progress in their efforts?
Yeah. Specifically in Syria, I can tell you that the Syrian Arab Coalition has, my understanding, made progress, specifically in the Al-Hol area, in taking that key town, and as they move closer towards Raqqa. This is, again, a sign of progress by local, motivated, capable forces that have shown a willingness to fight, and so that's something we're monitoring closely, and we consider that, again, a step forward in this fight. There are going to be steps backward, but right now that seems to be an encouraging sign of progress right now. Yes, Goyal.
Thanks very much. It's a two-part question. Going back to your statement on U.S.-Pakistan relations and also military-to-military relations and Army Chief's visit here, have Secretary discussed about future of Pakistan-U.S. military-to-military relations in connection with this, working with the civilian and military government in Pakistan, because there is just some rift going on between the two. Nobody knows there is two governments or three governments. And second, if they have discussed that if Pakistan still has any training centers in connection with ISIL and Al-Qaeda and others. And finally, who is supporting these ISIL or ISIS, and where they are getting financing, training, and arms?
Well, you got a lot of questions in there. Goyal, let me try and at least answer some of them if I can. First of all, the Secretary met with the General today. They talked about, again, the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, the military relationship going forward, and the relationship our two countries have and our shared interest in seeing regional security in the region, and obviously dealing with the terrorism threat not only in Pakistan but also in neighboring Afghanistan, and why continued cooperation is so vital in that. He met recently with the Prime Minister as well, had a positive, productive conversation with the Prime Minister, and the Secretary, again, believes that this relationship with Pakistan is important towards promoting regional stability, and we're going to continue having our dialogue, defense dialogue with Pakistan in that light, and welcome their efforts to trying to foster that stability to the extent possible. Again, not only in Pakistan itself, but also in Afghanistan, where they play such a critical role. And in terms of ISIL and who's supplying them, again, these are good questions, but this is a well-armed, well-funded terrorist organization that poses a significant threat to the United States and to a host of other countries. And part of our efforts, not only on the ground militarily, to defeat them, but also to defeat their sources of funding, their sources of resupply. And we mentioned the situation in Sinjar, and the prospect that this one particular operation could have in trying to strangle, if you will, cut off ISIL in Mosul from Raqqa and cutting off a vital supply line. That's part of our line of effort moving forward, and we'll see if this one particular operation does have an impact on ISIL going forward, at least in that one particular region.
We have so much technology now, and we don't know who is really arming them.
Well, again, they're getting arms from a variety of resources. This is we understand that this is a well-armed, capable enemy, and to the extent that we can identify where they're getting weapons from, we're going to make every effort to try and reduce that supply.
Up until now, Russia and the U.S.-led coalition has been sort of operating, as you point out, in separate airspace, with Russia going after a different set of targets. Mm-hmm. If this latest round of strikes by Russia does sort of represent a shift towards ISIS targets and more in the vicinity of ISIS, will the U.S. and Russia have to do sort of deeper deconfliction, because that airspace could get more crowded if, in fact, Russia does start moving more towards hitting ISIS targets in and around Raqqa, which is, of course, where the U.S.-led coalition is very intensely active?
We're not at the stage yet where we have to have that kind of conversation. We're confident that the memorandum of understanding we have in place and the protocols we have in place for our aircraft and their aircraft are sufficient to deal with the situation over Syria right now, and we're not going to hypothesize as to what happens in the future. But in this instance, those protocols worked. We did receive advance warning. We had our own missions conducted yesterday. They went out as planned, and we feel confident that we can avoid any sort of contact in the air, if you will, that could pose a safety threat to our pilots.
The coalition didn't have to adjust any of its activities.
We did not have to adjust any of our activities yesterday. Yes, Tara?
Yes, Peter. As a follow-on to that, as part of the MOU, does Russia also communicate when it has completed an airstrike? How would U.S. and coalition jets be able to safely maneuver over Raqqa if there are Russian long-range bombers conducting missions without knowing that these missions have completed for the day or completed that airstrike?
There are protocols, without getting into all the details, there are protocols in place for the conduct of the pilots themselves, in which case they might not even need to engage in communication with one another in terms of professional airmanship. And in terms of their operations over Syria, but there are also these backup communication lines in the event of misunderstanding or perhaps miscommunication. And so we feel confident that those protocols in place right now are adequate, given in addition, our own situational awareness for the safety of our pilots, that we can conduct our missions right now without concern, immediate concern, for some sort of accident involving the Russians. And again, if it turns out that we need to adjust this in some form or fashion, that's a conversation we can have at that time, but we're not there yet. Yes, Jeff.
Just on this issue of the Russian role, the French have said they're very keen to find ways to collaborate more closely with the Russians. Would that create difficulties for you, given that you do have a robust intelligence sharing relationship and other relationship with the French?
Yeah, we have a strong relationship with the French, and I'll let the French speak to their interactions with the Russians going forward, and we feel confident that our relationship with the French will, again, we stand shoulder to shoulder with the French. They're key members of the coalition. They were well before the events of Friday night in Paris, and we're confident that our interactions with the French will be as shoulder to shoulder with them, and will be as professional as they have been and will continue to be going forward. We don't have concerns about the French in terms of their own interactions with the Russians somehow in any way affecting the coalition operations. Laurent?
Do you think that the Paris attacks will bolster the role of France inside the coalition?
I think we're already seeing the role of France bolstered within the coalition. They were doing a significant amount before. They've been a strong partner in the coalition, and judging by what we've heard from the French government so far and the actions of the French government with regard to these most recent airstrikes, it seems pretty clear that they would like to expand their role. And we would like to do whatever we can to support the French in that effort, and we welcome others stepping up as well and providing more of a contribution to the coalition. But we have great respect for the French capabilities, and they're displaying some of those capabilities now.
Just a quick follow-up. I heard you said that France was second in terms of strikes on Syria or Iraq. I was not sure exactly of what you meant.
My understanding is in terms of combined airstrikes, they might be second in terms of nations providing those airstrikes. But we can check those numbers for you, Laurent.
Can you update the intelligence sharing?
Peter, do you have
Sorry.
information that the strike targeted at Jihadi John, in fact, killed him?
David, I don't have any further confirmation of that. We certainly feel confident that we hit the target that was intended, but at this point we don't have any additional confirmation that the strike was successful. We certainly hope that it was. Yes, Tolga.
Thanks. I want to go back to Secretary Kerry's remarks regarding this cooperation with the Turks in terms of entering an operation. What he said exactly, he said we will be entering an operation with the Turks to secure the rest of the Turkish-Syrian border. The 25% is still under the control of ISIL. So if he meant about this smuggling or foreign fighters issue, is DOD involved with these efforts? Are you working with the Turkish authorities to secure the border? Do you have any personnel or advisory in Turkey specifically on this mission?
As I said, we've been working with Turkey on a host of issues. They've been part of this coalition. We've been working on border issues. I did not see the Secretary's comments directly, and I have a hard enough time keeping track of my own Secretary, much less Secretary Carter. So I'll refer you to the State Department to exactly what the Secretary was referring to, but I've made clear that we've been working with the Turks and have talked about these border issues for some time, and anything further that can be done to bolster the security along that border, particularly the flow of foreign fighters, we believe would be a good thing.
No, my question is there any DOT personnel in Turkey specifically working on this issue?
I'm not going to get into details about something that I'm not entirely sure you're referring to. So at this point, I'll refer you to the State Department for clarity on what Secretary Kerry is talking about, and leave it at that. I think that'd be the wiser thing for me to do. Yes.
Lalit here. On Secretary's meeting with General Sharif today, what was the issue of Afghanistan discussed with him? And secondly, does the Secretary think that Pakistan is taking enough action against Haqqani network for the Secretary to certify to the Congress for the release of 350 million CFR funds?
Yeah. I will talk to you in just broad terms about the conversation, but they discussed Afghanistan and the situation in Afghanistan and how there continues to be issues along the border and what can be done on the Pakistani side of the border as well as within Afghanistan to try and foster a more stable situation because it would be in the interest of both countries. And they talked about that. Again, with regard to the Haqqani network, the Secretary made clear that the United States feels strongly about the need to go after groups like the Haqqani network that threaten the United States, threaten certainly U.S. forces operating in Afghanistan, and they both talk about the need to address that issue and other groups that pose a threat not only in Afghanistan but to Pakistan itself, and so that was part of the larger conversation.
Said that Secretary appreciated Pakistan's roles in counterterrorism operations in Pakistan and bordering Afghanistan. But given the recent reports, does the Secretary believe that Pakistan needs F-18 to fight against terrorism? Is that a useful tool to fight against terrorism?
There wasn't a discussion of particularly military hardware during the course of the conversation, and so they spoke in broad terms about the counterterrorism effort. And the sacrifices the Pakistanis have made, and the need for even additional effort in this area, again, on both sides of the border, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Gordon.
Can you expand a little bit on the deconfliction issue a little bit more?
Sure.
You guys have had this agreement in place for some weeks. Was this kind of really the first time that the U.S. and Russia have had to deconflict because of the nature of the geographical differences in where you were working? Or can you characterize, like, have there been daily conversations, or is this the first time? And then also, how much time did they give you advance notice on this operation overnight?
My understanding is this was the first instance in which the Russians did provide us advance warning of some of their operations. I don't have the exact amount of time they gave us, but it was professional, is my understanding, and that there was advance warning in which giving us the opportunity, if we had aircraft in the area, that we could have made adjustments. That wasn't necessary in this case.
So does the addition of the kind of increased strikes from France change the kind of calculus of this deconfliction situation, or how does that change it at all, if anything?
Yeah, right now, Gordon, it hasn't changed anything for us, for the coalition, including the French. We're going to continue to hit our targets. The French are hitting their targets, and the Russians clearly have their own. We're not coordinating or cooperating with the Russians in terms of targets, but we are taking these steps, these important steps, to make sure that our pilots, our crews, and the Russian crews for that matter, do not come into conflict with one another. And in this particular instance, that system, those protocols, did work effectively, but that, to my understanding, is the first time that that's been triggered. Yes, Joe.
You have said that the Russians are striking, hitting their targets, and the French are doing the same thing. What is the significance of striking, bombing Raqqa, and why not like Mosul or other cities?
Well, the coalition is hitting other cities as well, and we have other targets beyond Raqqa on our list. I think you can tell that from the reports we've been providing to on a regular basis. Raqqa is the center point of much of ISIL's operations, their self-appointed capital, and so it's not surprising that they would be a primary target, not just for the coalition, but for anyone who wants to go after ISIL.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Last Friday, the same day where the Pentagon announced striking Jihadi John, we have seen the attacks in Paris. The day before, the Pentagon has announced the liberation of Sinjar, and we have seen ISIS committing a suicide attack in Beirut. The question is, do you see any relation the question is, if you hit ISIS inside Syria and inside Iraq, do you think this will diminish its capabilities to conduct suicide attacks outside the Syrian and the Iraqi territories?
Our goal, Joe, is to degrade and ultimately defeat ISIL, and that is wherever ISIL is conducting its business. And right now that is primarily in Syria and Iraq, and we're going to continue to take the fight to them because we believe that taking the fight to ISIL in these areas will also reduce the chances of their ability to hit us here in the homeland in the United States and other countries as well. And we're going to continue that effort, that we're also going to do everything we can in the United States as the Department of Defense and as a government to protect Americans here at home as this fight continues. And that involves a host of other agencies as well, taking steps, the necessary steps to protect this country as we've been doing for some time. In the back.
Yeah, Peter, hi. Just to follow up once again on your on the question about deconflicting with Russia. So you said that they, in this case, provided a professional amount of time to explain what they were going to do so that the U.S. could have adjusted their plans if they conflicted. So what happens when there is a conflict? Does the U.S. then get out of the way? Do they push back on Russia? What happens there?
We haven't adjusted our plans up to this point. Our missions flew as normal yesterday, and you're talking about a hypothetical situation that has not come to fruition, if you will. We are confident in our ability to conduct our operations safely and effectively. We're going to continue to operate at the same pace, if not a higher pace going forward. And we don't see any prospect right now for a problem. And if it reaches a point in the future where we have to have another conversation, we have a mechanism with which to do that. But we don't anticipate that's a problem. We're going to continue to wage our campaign as planned.
That must be something that this building is considering, right? I mean, Russia is expanding its campaign swiftly, and it's getting very, very close to where the U.S. is conducting its campaign. So, what's the point?
We have excellent situational awareness for our pilots. We feel confident that they can conduct their missions going forward in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term without interference from Russia. And again, we have this protocol in place, which is anticipated to address these kinds of situations. It worked in this instance. We believe it'll work going forward. And if we have to adjust it, we're prepared to have that conversation, but we're not there yet. Yes, let me go over here, and then I'll try and wrap up because I've got to go to a meeting in 4 minutes.
Peter, what is the understanding on the Saudi use of those smart bombs, where they cannot use them, the proposal that's gone up to Congress? And also, given the general contentment on what the air status is, does that mean that we're not pushing for implementation of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty?
Well, first on your first question, this is an arms sale, involves the State Department, and I'll just say broadly that obviously we precision-guided munitions.
Are Are they going to use them in Yemen? I mean, where are they going to use them?
I'll leave it to the Saudis to characterize where they're going to use.
Do we have restrictions?
We
only have restrictions on munitions controls, export controls.
We do. Again, I'll refer you to the State Department, which conducts, actually is responsible for these kinds of sales. But we've, as we've talked about in the past, with regard to munitions, we feel strongly about doing everything possible to limit the potential for civilian casualties, including on the part of our partners, and that's the same with Saudi Arabia, and we've delivered that message in the past.
So where are they going to use them?
I can't speak to something that happens in the future.
Congress is going to ask.
Exactly, and that's the appropriate role for Congress. And these are questions that are part of any sale of military equipment.
$1 billion.
Correct, and this is something notice that's gone to Congress. And these are questions Congress obviously has the prerogative to ask, and part of the entire sales process that's, as I mentioned, was directed by the State Department specifically. So I'm not going to look into the future into crystal ball. I can't anticipate. Tony, I'm sorry, your Article 5?
Article 5 of North Atlantic Treaty. Is there any push to use it? A number of the candidates have been calling for the implementation of Article 5.
Yeah, obviously this is a decision that would be to invoke Article 5 would be something that France makes. So this is a decision for the French, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with the French. This is a difficult moment for them. We've tried to provide as much support as we can, and we respect whatever decision they make with regard to NATO.
So we would be supportive of their implementation.
We respect any decision the French choose to make in this area. Tony.
General Austin's here for these meetings with the Secretary. Can you see if he would do a briefing? He was reluctant, but he did one last year.
I will take that under advisement and pass it along.
I have a space question, not related to Iraq, Syria, or France.
Yep.
Yesterday, the Space World United Launch Alliance announced they were not going to compete for the first competitive military space launch, leaving SpaceX virtually the sole source. My question for you is, one of their reasons was the Pentagon declined to give them a waiver to use Russian-made RD-180 engines, a waiver to the current law, and that was one of the reasons they felt they couldn't compete. In retrospect, does DoD regret that decision? And why did you make it in the first place?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the source selection process for a process that's ongoing right now, so I can't talk about a contract that hasn't been awarded yet. So I'll leave it to the companies to discuss whether or not they bid or did not. But I'll point you back, Tony, to the comments of the Deputy Secretary, who said that the consideration was made as to whether or not a waiver was necessary. At this particular moment in time, the determination was a waiver was not necessary, and nothing's changed since the Deputy Secretary made those comments.
No regrets, though, that you're going to have a sole source basically for the first competitive launch, military competitive launch program.
I can't talk about a contract award that hasn't been made yet, but these were considerations that the Deputy Secretary and others looked at carefully at that time. These are rules put in place by Congress, and we have to abide by those rules. And the Deputy Secretary, again, working with others here, looked carefully at this situation and decided that in this instance, at this particular moment in time, a waiver was not merited. So, I got a last question here, and then I got to run.
The Japanese land minister on November 17th sued Okinawa governor and sending the long-running dispute between the central government and Okinawa prefecture over U.S. military base and construction to the court. So do you have any comment about that?
Yeah. The Department of Defense continues to believe that with the help of the government of Japan that this project will be able to move forward. And we thank the government of Japan for its efforts in this regard. And again, we believe that ultimately that the relocation of that facility is in the best interest of the people of Okinawa as well. And we're going to continue to work as closely with the government of Japan moving forward to try and make that happen. So thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate it.